Hello, my name's Fraser Husband and welcome to East Adamston Farm. Today I'm going to give you a wee tour about and show you some of the stuff we're up to just now. So a wee background about us, we're based 7 miles northwest of Dundee in Angus, and my family has farmed here since the 1940s. Currently we're predominantly an arable and fruit farm. Arable wise we're growing spring barley for malting, wheat and vining peas as a break crop. On the fruit front we're growing blackcurrants, blueberries and most recently apples. We also have a broiler poultry unit on the farm, and our most recent venture has been into the development and production of craft cider on the farm, which we'll come to later on. So let's go for a wee wander about. Come on! Okay, so we're in a field of young blackcurrants here. This is how our bushes start their life out. These were planted back in March. So at planting time all we're doing is putting a blackcurrant cutting into the ground, and it's literally like a pencil with bare wood with a few buds on it. We stick that in the ground and the roots eventually work their way down to moisture. And they've taken not too badly considering the dry spell we had throughout the spring. You can actually see some fruit on some of these younger ones here. So the life cycle of the blackcurrants are usually year 1 planted as cuttings, then they'll be up to cropping in about year 3 and fully cropping in year 4, where we'll get the harvester right through them. We'll now go have a look at some fully grown bushes. Alright, so we're now in a field of mature blackcurrants. This variety is Ben Guerin, our earliest variety. We have another 4 varieties, all have slightly different characteristics, plus they help spread the harvest out throughout the month with different ripening times. The key things we want with the blackcurrants is good Brix level, so that's natural sugars, we want that as high as possible. And we want a nice evening ripening, so we want all the fruit black at once. So judging by this, we're going to be in here in 7 to 10 days maybe. We're still waiting for these greens and reds to ripen up a wee bit more. So we get a nice even crop. The great thing about blackcurrants is they're all totally mechanised, totally machine harvested, which means we're not relying on having to get big squads of people to hand pick the fruit in, which is a great saving on labour. I'll give you a quick look at the machine when we're back at the farm. So all these blackcurrants are on contract to go to Ribena. So once they're harvested, we'll take them into the shed and they'll be picked up by an Arctic the same day, and they're taken down south to Somerset. We'll pressed the same day or the day after they're harvested. And then they're then transported in tankers to the Ribena factory, where they're then made into Ribena. So our biggest threat to the blackcurrants just now would be the muggy, humid weather we're having, and the rain obviously. We want it as dry as possible for now to ensure no mould comes into the fruit and to avoid any currants being burst. Yeah, I'm not quite ready yet. Alright, so we're now at the poultry unit up the back. You don't even know it's up the back. My grandfather got into chickens back in the 60s on another site with older sheds, and then in 1994 Dad built the first shed here. The most recent shed was being built in 2013 behind me, and in 2014 we installed biomass boilers to supply the heat to the chickens as they require consistent heat all year round, which works perfectly in sync with the biomass. Big pros with chickens is, unlike other farms, you're not as reliant on the weather, it's more controllable. Especially the seasons we're getting just now, and one of the most valuable outputs from the chickens is also the hen pen, the dung we get from the chickens. It's great for the crops, like rocket fuel. You have to be careful how much you put on, and over the years we really built up the organic matter of the farm really well. It's a huge asset to have on the land. So now we're also in the middle of putting up a new shed on the farm. It was planned to be ready for fruit harvest, but as you can see we might be struggling to put fruit in it next week. Alright, so I'll give you a quick look at our blackcurrant harvester, which I should probably hurry up and get put together because we're going to need it quite soon. So how it works, this is driven up the middle of the bush. The spike splits the bush in half either side. As the bush comes in, these fingers are vibrating, shaking the bush, which we can adjust how aggressive we want the shaking. The fruit then drops through the bush and lands onto these elevators, which are then taken to the back. The fruit then travels up this back elevator, and in these black boxes we have 2 fans either side that'll be blowing and taking any leaves or loose twigs out the back and blowing them down these chutes, leaving a nice clean sample. The fruit then drops into this hopper, which then joins onto this trailer on the back, towed by the harvester. The fruit will go up and onto this elevator that turns a full 360 right round. And on the back we'll have half-ton Dolav bins, so they'll be filled up, and we'll have 2 or 3 people in the back operating that and filling each bin as we go along. The bins are then taken off the forklift, taken to the shed, and stored in an insulated shed until they're ready for pickup to head down south the same night. Another bit of unusual kit we've got on the farm is our wee berry tractor. This does all the blackcurrant work. It's just over a metre wide, so it's perfect for going up and down the drills, and does everything from spraying to pruning in the winter. It's currently got its body armour on just now. This is to get up between the rows. As the crop gets bigger and you get more fruit, the bushes begin to fold into the middle and close up, so it's the best way to get up without damaging the tractor as well as sliding the bushes as well. Alright, so we're now in one of the orchards here on the farm. Back in 2012 we put our first apple trees in the ground. Initially we didn't know what was going to grow well here, so we planted about 8 different varieties, and out of that we found that the Swedish variety Katie grows the best, which is planted in this field here. So this was planted back in February last year as a 1-year rootstock. So it's now, well, just over a year in our ground. You see they're flourishing reasonably well, especially showing its resilience after the wet winter we had. Katie also produces a nice dual purpose apple. It's an eating apple as well as making a really nice juice, which is what we're looking for with the cider. So the tree should be up and fully cropping in year 5, and life expectancy wise they'll be in the ground for 50+ years. So harvest time is usually around the first week of September. Currently everything is hand-picked, but the plan is to go down a fully mechanised harvest route, which usually entails a big claw coming along, grabbing the tree, shaking it, fruit drops to the ground, and then a following machine comes up and hoovers the apples up. But we're going to have to wait until year 5 before we've got a decent enough trunk to get a grip of. The only issue with that is the apples will be slightly bruised as they hit the ground, but in our case it shouldn't matter, as we'll be juicing them within a day or 2 of the harvest. So we've planted the rows at 5.5 metres apart for the purpose of machine harvesting, and you'll also see that we've planted white clover up the centres, which really the bees absolutely love, which helps at pollination time. Also last year we formed a growers group, so as well as ourselves there's another 3 farmers with apples in the ground, and the intent is to supply us with the apples to produce more cider. So initially we set out to start making apple juice, so we did that for a couple of years on the farm. We had a small press, making the juice, pasteurising it and selling it through local farm shops. From there we naturally progressed into cider. The first few attempts were a bit dodgy, we weren't quite, there were still early days for us, but just in the past couple of years or so we've really pushed on the cider front, and we think we've managed to develop a product we're really happy with. We'll go have a wee look at the next part of the process. So once harvested, the apples will either be picked by hand into tubs, which we'll tip directly into here, or we'll make a pit on the farm and store them in bulk there and be bucketed into this hopper here that we got specially made for the job. So this will hold around 5 tons of apples, and they'll be trickled up the elevator onto this picking table here. From here we'll have either 1 or 2 people standing here picking out any rotten apples or twigs or whatever other debris we don't want in. Once here it drops into this wash bath. So as you can see there, it'll drop in to these brushes which will be spinning around into this bath, which is full of water up to the top. Through here these pipes will be blasting air, so it's kind of like a bubble bath effect to give them a good wash. This propeller then fires them along, picked up by this elevator, and again here there's a few jets of water that will spray onto the apples to make sure they're definitely clean. We'll then continue up this elevator into the macerator here. So the mashed apples then drop out of the chute here into our belt press. So this works, there's a series of rollers of floating bearings that get smaller and smaller as we go down, with a belt running in between each roller. Mashes between and gets squeezed out as you go. The juice then drops down into these trays and runs into this main collection tray here. From there there'll be a pump and another collection tray, and as it fills up it will, there's 2 float switches that will be triggered to activate a pump, and we'll take that to the tanks over here. So when running full whack, this press can do about 3 tons per hour, and juice wise you're looking at getting about between 65 and 700 litres of juice per tonne of apple you put in, depending how the press is set. The more ripe the apples are, the better it is to extract the juice. The only waste product we get off this is the pomace, that's the leftover mash, once all the juice is extracted out, and that comes off the slide on the back, and then we fill into these half-cut IBCs. We're still looking at other things we can maybe use that waste product for. So the freshly crushed apple juice is then pumped directly into these stainless steel tanks. These hold 5,000 litres. And once the juice is there, we'll test it throughout the pressing for sugar level using a hydrometer. So that the higher the sugar, we'll know that that converts to the level of alcohol. We'll also test the acidity, because that affects the balance and taste of the cider. From there, once the tank is full, we then add an enzyme called pectinase that breaks down the juice, just helps with fermentation, and then also from there we will add our own champagne yeast. Could just leave it as apple juice and leave the wild yeast to do the fermentation. However, with using the wild stuff you never know what you're going to get, so every single tank would be different and you'd never be able to repeat it. So for consistency we use champagne yeast, so we have a nice consistent product through our line. So once fermentation kicks off, what's happening is that the yeast inside is turning the sugar, the natural sugar in the apple, to alcohol. So in the middle of summer when it's warm, this can take 7 days and you'll have apple juice to finish fermented cider within a week. As the months get colder, it then takes longer and longer. It can be up to 3 weeks for that process. And you'll see the temperature shoot up as you do that. It can go up to 27, near 28 degrees during fermentation from the heat from that. So once it starts slowing down and all the sugar has been turned to alcohol, the yeast start dying off and dropping to the bottom. So we'll then leave it sitting for maybe 2 months, let all the dead yeast, let all the settlement and sediment drop to the bottom so it naturally filters itself. From there we'll then go, after 2 months of settling, we'll then rack the cider. So this is a process of where we take the clean filtered finished cider out and we'll leave the dead yeast, the kind of muck at the bottom. So from there we'll pump out of here either into IBCs or an empty clean tank. And from there that'll be the racked base cider, so that's your raw, almost finished fermented cider. So once the cider is racked, we will then leave that for a number of months to mature in either the tank or an IBC vessel. Once it's matured for a few months, we like to mature it for at least 3 months properly. From there we will then transport the finished rack cider to the bottler and it will be then sent back to us as the finished product. And finally to the finished product, Lost Orchard Cider. Our name correlates quite well with our ethos of trying to replant Scotland's lost orchards that have been ripped out through time, relating back to our team of growers trying to increase the number of apples in Scotland. Last year we entered the International Cider Awards and managed to come away with a gold, which we're very impressed with in our first year. We class ourselves as a modern cider. We're using more culinary, sweeter varieties of apples like our Katie, staying away from the more traditional cider apples that tend to be drier and higher tannings. So overall we are very pleased with our finished product. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this tour. Cheers.